Remember the funny joke about confusing John, the book of John with the book of First John, the wedding cake story? So this woman, ordered her wedding cake, and she told the baker the Bible scripture that she wanted, which was what Mary just read: perfect love casts out all fear. In First John, well, the baker, not a church person, looked up that chapter and verse in the book of John and happened to get, which is what ended up on the wedding cake, this woman has 5 husbands, and the one she is with now is not hers. And it's really true. If you match them up, it's hysterical. The world is full of funny stories. So other people besides you have made that little mistake. That's okay. So I have been laughingly to myself referring to today as Reassurance Sunday. It's a new entry on the church liturgical calendar. That's because everybody always gets a little bit twitchy when it's time to change pastors. So I thought it might be a good idea this morning to step back a little, take a look at where we've been, take a look at where we're headed, and remind ourselves that all shall be well. Looking back, my own understanding about church has changed with time and some experience. When I got here in 1998, Jim Burklow was the pastor. I learned so much from him. He introduced me to progressive Christianity, to the Jesus Seminar, to Marcus Borg, John Shelby Spong, and I was so hungry for a Christianity that was credible, that I didn't have to check my brain at the door and believe, 6 impossible things before breakfast. Jim pointed me toward the meditation group, where the other Jim and Eshwaran taught me how to meditate. I learned about Taizé. Oh my God, what's not to like about that? Jim pointed me toward PSR. He said, this is a direct quote, he said, "You don't have to be a minister or anything. Just go to learn, you'll meet some interesting people." Yeah. And the greatest gift of all, he's the one who taught me how to relax as a worship leader. That whatever happens is good. It's not a performance where you need to be perfect. It's a gathering of kindred spirits where you share. It makes all the difference in the world how you approach leading a worship service. But when he left 5 years later, I fell into the standard trap of wanting to find another pastor like him. And that doesn't really work. Pastors are unique people. We all are. They're all different. It took me a long time to realize that I didn't want another Burklow per se. I wanted another person who knew who they were. I wanted another pastor who would just be their genuine self. I wanted another pastor who was in alignment, who was an integrated whole person, a grown-up. That's what I was looking for. But it took me a while to figure that out. So the caveat to all of you guys is, please don't expect Jorge to be like me, right? It's not fair to him. He can't do it anyway. You don't want 2 of me. You already got 1, and 2 would be like overkill. We want different gifts in the mix, right? I've talked before about how the church community is like an orchestra. The instruments are different on purpose. If they were all violins, boring. I mean, what kind of music could you play with 80 violins? You want different instruments. Our gifts are not all the same, and that's good. With Jorge, we're opening the door to his world, which is different from what most of us have experienced. It's kind of like we're a standard symphony orchestra and we just hired a marimba player, okay? I mean, different, right? The thing is, there is actually a repertoire of music scored for symphony orchestra plus marimba. We've just never been able to play it because we never had a marimba before. So we're going to get some new perspectives on the world. We're going to play some new music. It's going to be great. It's going to be pretty cool. I knew we were going to be okay when I got unexpected confirmation last November. Now, you got to think about the timing. Penny Nixon was here, standing right here at the end of August. We saw her in the moment where she said, you guys are looking for a minister, part-time. I know somebody he could fit here, And you just saw her wheels going, yeah, I got to hook up Jorge in College Heights Church. This might work. It's the end of August, okay? So I get this, so here we are toward the end of November. You guys might remember my friend Bruce Ray's Chow, Presbyterian pastor. He's preached for us once before. We had him signed up to preach again at the end of November. So I'm sending him the standard email a few weeks ahead saying, hey, your date's coming up. What are you going to preach about? I'll be your worship leader, blah, blah, blah. And here's the sequence of emails that happened. Dated November 1st. Oh God, Polly, I totally blipped on this. And now I'm at a church starting this Sunday. There was a frenzied time in my world, and I think I dropped a bunch of things. Basically, he's not coming, right? He forgot about us, blah, blah, blah. And then he ends with, on the bright side, I hear you're talking with Jorge, a good friend of mine. And I'm like, what? How did you find out? What? So I write back, Bruce, you forgot, blah, blah, blah. Small world about Jorge. What's your connection to him? Our search committee's just gotten his profile. Bruce replies, I'm at Stone Church in San Jose, but only as a bridge pastor through the end of January. As far as Jorge goes, I just love him as a human. We were arrested together a few years ago at a border action. He's definitely social justice and faith-oriented, and at the point in his career that he's pretty clear about those things. So if they call him, there will be no surprises. Does this mean that you're transitioning out and retiring? Bruce. What that said to me was that, at least from Bruce's perspective, Jorge knows who he is. He knows what matters to him. He knows what he's called to do. He's in alignment. And that's what we're looking for. That makes him he's going to show up as his real self, not the ministry as a job or it's a role I'm playing, and he will show up as his real self. And then in my ear, I hear probably Wortman saying, but things will change. David is not a big change fan. And I will reply, yes. And actually, they've been changing all along. Usually the changes are small, 1 or 2 people at a time as people die or move away and new people arrive. It's a gradual process of adaptation, like an amoeba that kind of moves to incorporate somebody new or fill in a hole when somebody dies. But when you stand back and look at the total amount of change, it can be a little surprising. In preparation for last Sunday's vote, David put together a list of the voting members of the church. Those are the people who are active, not just church members, but who show up. 28 in total. The surprise is that 14 of the 28 have joined the church in the last 6 years. That means that over the course of my tenure as pastor, half of the church has been reconstituted. That's huge. And yet, we are still recognizably College Heights Church. I've come to see that kind of change as evidence of life, of health. It means we are sustainable, even with a demographic skewed toward gray. It means that there continue to be people who are attracted to this way of being church. I suspect that in part that is because we as a body are in alignment. We know who we are. We know why we are here. We know why we gather. It says it right there. We gather to create welcoming, spirit-filled places of empowering generosity so that all may safely find their voice and be inspired to transform the world. That's a high calling. And as long as we make our decisions going forward in alignment with our own identity, we'll be fine. It's that way for people, it's that way for groups of people. The other thing I need to reassure you about is that I'm not leaving, right? People have been like, ah! I'm passing the reins to Jorge, and I'm stepping back into the circle to be the same active member I was before, with perhaps a bit more empathy about what it means to be the pastor. I'll still be doing Taizé, still preaching once in a while, maybe teaching a class occasionally, still being on the lookout for what needs doing, what ball is about to drop, you know, the usual deal. Jorge and I will work out the transition details. You know, I'm not worried about it. The reason I can stay is that I never accepted a formal call from College Heights. We never had an installation service. We never went through the formal liturgy where the conference representative comes out and say the standard words. And the reason we didn't do that is that I knew the standard words would include my promise to leave when the next minister comes. I never had any intention of leaving. This is my church. I don't want to go anywhere else. But that's why my title was Pastor Pro Tem, just for now, for the time being. And why do they have that rule? Why do former pastors leave? It's because the usual model of pastoral authority looks like a cone with the pastor at the top. And if the old pastor stays, then you got two tops, and it's like a pack with two alphas, and it just really doesn't work. But if you change the model of pastoral authority so that it's flat, and the minister is just the person in the middle who's kind of coordinating all the stuff that's moving around, not the person on top telling everybody else what to do, then somebody else can be the coordinator. That's not, you just step in and out of the center. We're perhaps not quite as flat in that way as the Quakers, who literally have no spiritual head and make all their decisions by consensus, which I'm totally impressed by. Any group that can decide the color of the new carpet in the sanctuary by consensus is amazing. I just can't even imagine that, but they do. They know how. We're a lot closer to flat than most churches. And this flat model, this do-it-yourself church, is an experiment in doing church differently. I counted up just for fun. Last year, 2023, we had 13 different outside speakers, preachers, and 12 different members of the congregation who took a Sunday. over 6 years, we've basically demonstrated that this model works, that it produces a viable, sustainable church that can even survive a pandemic. We hadn't counted on that, but we got through it okay. The only thing we haven't done yet, the last big milestone we need to demonstrate to ourselves, is that we can transition to a new coordinator in the middle without drama. Without drama. That's my goal. It's a smooth transition. It's going to be fine. So I want to close with a story that I shared in a sermon about 15 years ago. I think it's okay to repeat it because the new people haven't heard it, and the old people have probably forgotten it, right? Yeah. It's the story of the time that I had a tarot reading done up in Spokane with Suzanne's friend, Sybil. Sybil was a psychic. Is that a good name for a psychic? Sybil? Sybil was amazing. So we go over to Sybil's house, and she pulls out her tarot cards. Tarot readings are a lot like Lectio Divina, in that the cards don't tell you anything you don't already know. They just help you access your own intuitive knowledge. They pull out things that are already inside you. Sybil used a tarot deck called Voyager cards. I brought my deck in case anybody's curious later. They use beautiful photographic collages instead of the standard line drawings. And I could ask a question of the cards, although not yes, no, because their cards are not decision makers. But I could ask a question, and then I would draw from this. She spread out the whole deck face down, and I could just draw. The thing that blew me away about this reading was the particular cards I drew. I could never understand how they were so spot on relevant to the question. For example, Sybil asked me at the beginning to draw 3 cards representing aspects of my life up till now. Okay, so this is about 2010, which means I'd been through seminary. I'd actually been ordained already, but was working with Center for Progressive Christianity. But aspects of my life up till now. All 3 of the cards came from the suit that represents things of the intellect, left brain stuff, which was, of course, my mathematical career that I'd just come off of 30 years of only doing left brain stuff. The trouble is that whole suit of cards of the intellect, there are only 14 of them in this deck of 78, and I drew out of that deck 3 times. That doesn't seem very random. It isn't random. Then I was to draw 3 cards for aspects of my life going forward, and all 3 of those came from the suits, things of the spirit and things of emotion. I actually did the statistical calculation. It's ridiculously small, just ridiculously small. I still, to this day, I do not understand how I drew the cards that I drew. Anyway, long story short, the last question of my reading was, how can I best help my church? Because Kimberly had just left, and we didn't know what we were going to do next. So, all right, how can I best help? Sybil said, draw a card for the church, draw a card for your question. So a card I drew for the church is on the front of your bulletin. It says Regenerator. It has healing water on it and a blooming hyacinth and these smiling faces down in the corner that look kind of like Kadji and Sammy if you squint. Yeah? Says Sybil, looks like a healthy community to me. I said, yeah, I think so. And then I drew a card for my question. And it said love. Oh, said Sybil, just love them. Just hold the energy and it will all unfold as it should. One more time. Love is the answer. And it will be with Jorge, too. So, questions? Thoughts?